The panic hit Clara Zimmerman the moment she spotted Derek Mitchell walking toward her between the vegetable stands at the Saturday morning farmer's market, his eyes scanning the crowd like a predator searching for prey. She had spent the last 3 months dodging her ex-boyfriend's increasingly desperate attempts to talk things through after she had caught him texting another woman with promises that made her stomach turn. Breaking up with him had been easy. Getting him to accept it was proving impossible. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as Derek's gaze swept closer to where she stood frozen near a display of heirloom tomatoes. Without thinking, she darted sideways and pressed herself against the back of the tallest person nearby, a man in an expensive-looking navy sweater who smelled like cedar, and something clean she could not quite place. "Please just go with it," she whispered urgently against his shoulder blade. The man went completely still for half a second, then turned his head slightly. She caught a glimpse of a strong jaw and dark hair before he spoke in a voice that was surprisingly warm, despite the strangeness of the situation. "Whatever you need," he said quietly. Then his hand came up to rest on her hip with casual familiarity that sent an unexpected shiver through her. He shifted his stance, angling his body to shield her more completely from view, while he continued examining the produce in front of them as if nothing unusual was happening. Clara held her breath as Derek's footsteps came closer. She made herself as small as possible behind her unexpected protector, her cheek pressed against soft cashmere, her fingers clutching the fabric at his sides. "Morning, Mr. Vance," an elderly vendor called out cheerfully. "Good to see you again." "The usual morning, Margaret. Yes, please." "And add whatever my girlfriend wants," the man said smoothly, his thumb drawing an absent circle against Clara's hip that felt far too natural for a complete stranger. Clara's mind stuttered over the word girlfriend, even as she peeked around his arm to see Derek moving past them, his attention caught by someone else calling his name across the market. Relief flooded through her so intensely her knees felt weak. "Is he gone?" the man asked, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. Clara watched Derek turn down another aisle, finally nodding. "Yes, thank you. I am so sorry, that was completely insane of me." The man turned to face her fully for the first time, and Clara's breath caught for an entirely different reason. He was gorgeous in a way that seemed almost unfair, with deep brown eyes that held genuine concern, dark hair that looked professionally styled but slightly tousled by the morning breeze, and features that belonged on a magazine cover. He had to be in his early 30s, maybe 6 or 7 years older than her 25 years. "Don't apologize. You look terrified." He studied her face with an intensity that made her acutely aware of how close they still stood. "Ex-boyfriend." "Who will not take no for an answer," Clara confirmed, finally stepping back and immediately missing the warmth of him. "I have been trying to avoid him for weeks. He just appears everywhere." The man's expression hardened slightly. "That is not okay. Has he threatened you?" "Not exactly. He just wants to talk, he says, but he makes me uncomfortable, and I have told him to stop contacting me." Clara tucked a strand of her light brown hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious. "Anyway, thank you for being incredibly kind to a random woman who used you as a human shield. I should let you get back to your shopping." "Jason Vance," he said, extending his hand with a slight smile that made something flutter in her chest. "And you are welcome to use me as a shield anytime you need one. Clara Zimmerman." His hand was warm and strong, his grip confident without being aggressive. "I promise I do not usually ambush strangers and pretend to date them." "Shame. I was starting to think farmers' markets were more exciting than I gave them credit for." The teasing glint in his eyes made her laugh despite the residual anxiety thrumming through her system. Margaret makes the best apple butter in the state. Let me buy you some as payment for the most interesting market trip I have had in months." Clara started to protest, but something in his expression stopped her. He looked like he genuinely wanted her company, not just being polite. And honestly, she was not ready to leave the safety of his presence yet in case Derek came back around. "Okay," she agreed. "But only if you let me buy you something in return. Fair trade." Jason's smile widened. "Deal." They spent the next 20 minutes wandering through the market together, and Clara kept expecting the conversation to turn awkward or stilted, but it never did. Jason was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed he actually listened to her answers. She learned he came to this market most Saturday mornings when he was in town, that he had a weakness for fresh bread, and that he was surprisingly knowledgeable about heirloom vegetables. "So what do you do, Jason?" Clara asked as they stopped at a booth selling fresh pasta. "I am in real estate development," he said, which she would later realize was a massive understatement. "I spend a lot of time looking at properties and trying to convince people my ideas will work." "What about you?" "I am a veterinary technician at a clinic downtown. Mostly dogs and cats, occasionally something more exotic. Last week we had a bearded dragon who had eaten something he should not have." Clara grinned at the memory. The owner was convinced he was dying. Turned out he was just shedding and grumpy about it. Jason laughed, a genuine sound that made his whole face light up. "I cannot decide if that is better or worse than my week, which involved 3 hours of arguing about parking lot drainage systems. Definitely worse." At least the bearded dragon was cute. They were standing near a flower vendor when Clara saw Derek again, this time heading directly toward them. Her body tensed involuntarily. "He is back," she said quietly. Jason followed her gaze and his expression shifted into something protective. Without missing a beat, he handed his shopping bag to his other hand and reached for Clara's, lacing their fingers together with practiced ease. "Stay close," he murmured. Derek stopped directly in front of them, his attention locked on Clara. He was good-looking in a conventional way with blonde hair and blue eyes, but 3 months of space had let Clara see the petulance in his expression, the way his charm only extended as far as getting what he wanted. "Clara, I have been trying to reach you," Derek said, barely glancing at Jason. "I know, I have been ignoring you." Clara was proud of how steady her voice sounded, even with her heart racing. "I have asked you to stop contacting me. We need to talk about what happened. You are being unreasonable." Derek's voice had that wheedling tone she had grown to hate in their final weeks together. "She said she does not want to talk to you." Jason's voice was calm, but carried an edge of steel that made even Clara stand a little straighter. "I think you should respect that." Derek finally looked at Jason properly, seeming to register for the first time that Clara was holding someone's hand. His face flushed. "And who are you?" "Her boyfriend," Jason said with such easy confidence that Clara almost believed it herself. "And I am going to say this once. She has asked you to leave her alone. So leave her alone, or we are going to have a problem that involves the police." Something in Jason's posture or tone must have gotten through because Derek took a step back, his expression cycling through anger and embarrassment. He looked at Clara one more time. "This is not over," he said. "Yes, it is," Clara replied firmly. "Do not contact me again, Derek. I mean it." They watched him stalk away through the market crowd. Clara realized she was gripping Jason's hand hard enough that her knuckles were white. She forced herself to loosen her hold, but Jason did not let go. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes, no, maybe." Clara took a shaky breath. "Thank you again. You really did not have to do that, I know, but I wanted to." Jason's thumb stroked across the back of her hand, a small gesture that somehow steadied her spinning thoughts. "Listen, I know this is probably too forward given that we met 20 minutes ago under extremely weird circumstances, but can I give you my number, in case he bothers you again? Or if you need someone to pretend to be your boyfriend at the grocery store or the post office or wherever. Clara felt herself smiling despite everything. That is either very sweet or you are the smoothest person I have ever met. Cannot it be both? Jason pulled out his phone, the corner of his mouth quirking up. I promise I am not a serial killer or a stalker. You can look me up. Jason Vance, Vance Development Group. I have a very boring but legitimate online presence. Clara typed his number into her phone, then sent him a text so he would have hers. I am going to look you up, just so you know. Veterinary technician skills include being extremely thorough. I would expect nothing less. Jason's expression turned more serious. But really, Clara, if he escalates or makes you feel unsafe, call me. I meant what I said about the police. That kind of behavior is not okay. I will. Thank you, Jason, for everything. They stood there for a moment, still holding hands in the middle of the farmer's market, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. This strange, unexpected morning had turned into something else entirely, something that felt like possibility. Can I see you again? Jason asked. In a situation where you are not hiding from anyone, and we can just have a normal conversation like regular people. I would like that, Clara said, and meant it completely. They exchanged a few more words, made tentative plans for coffee later in the week, and finally parted ways. Clara walked back to her car with her bag of farmer's market purchases, and Jason's number in her phone, her mind replaying every moment of their encounter. It was not until she got home and did actually look him up online that she realized the man who had pretended to be her boyfriend was not just in real estate development. Jason Vance was a billionaire who owned one of the largest development companies in the region, with projects across 3 states and a net worth that made her slightly dizzy to contemplate. There were articles about his business deals, photos from charity galas, mentions of properties he owned that sounded like they belonged in architectural magazines. Clara stared at her phone, wondering what a man like that could possibly want with someone like her. Then she remembered the genuine warmth in his eyes, the way he had protected her without hesitation, how easy their conversation had been. Maybe, just maybe, he had seen the same thing in her that she had seen in him. Something real beneath the surface circumstances. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When she opened it, she found a message from Jason. Made it home safely, I hope. And I am sorry if I came on too strong. I genuinely enjoyed meeting you even under strange circumstances. Looking forward to coffee. Jason. Clara smiled and typed back. Home safe. You were not too strong, and I looked you up. You could have mentioned the billionaire thing. His response came quickly. Would you have believed me? Also, I like that you talk to me like a normal person. That does not happen as much as you would think. Fair point. I promise to continue treating you like a normal person who just happens to have an excessive amount of money. That is all I ask. See you Wednesday. Wednesday, Clara confirmed. She spent the rest of the weekend alternating between excitement and nervousness. Part of her worried she had imagined the connection between them, that it had just been adrenaline and fear making everything feel more intense. But another part remembered the way Jason had looked at her, the care in his voice, the natural way he had taken her hand. Monday at work was busy enough to keep her distracted. Clara spent her day helping with appointments, calming anxious pets, and assisting Dr. Patterson with a complicated dental procedure on a very patient golden retriever. Her coworker and friend Rachel noticed something was different almost immediately. You are smiling at your phone, Rachel said accusingly during their lunch break. You never smile at your phone. What happened? Clara debated keeping it to herself but knew Rachel would just pester her until she gave in. I met someone at the farmer's market on Saturday. You met someone at the farmer's market while buying vegetables. Rachel's eyes went wide. Tell me everything immediately. So Clara told her the whole strange story, watching Rachel's expression go from amused to shocked to delighted. Wait, Jason Vance. The Jason Vance who just donated like $5 million to the children's hospital. Rachel grabbed Clara's arm. That Jason Vance? Apparently, yes. And he pretended to be your boyfriend and gave you his number, and you are getting coffee with him on Wednesday. That is the current plan. Rachel sat back in her chair, shaking her head in disbelief. This is like something out of a movie. Your ex is going to lose his mind when he finds out. Derek does not get to find out anything about my life anymore, Clara said firmly. And honestly, I am trying not to think too hard about the whole billionaire thing. Jason seems like a good person. That is what matters. A good person who looks like that and has that much money, Rachel said with a grin. But seriously, I am happy for you. You deserve someone who treats you well after what Derek put you through. Wednesday arrived faster than Clara expected. She changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a green sweater that Rachel had once said brought out her eyes. They were meeting at a small coffee shop near the clinic. Jason's suggestion after Clara had mentioned she had to work until 3. She arrived 5 minutes early to find Jason already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He stood when he saw her, and Clara was struck again by how genuinely attractive he was, tall and broad-shouldered in a perfectly fitted gray shirt and dark jeans that probably cost more than her rent. I took a guess on your order, Jason said, gesturing to the cups. Vanilla latte, extra shot. But I can get you something else if I am wrong. How did you know? You were carrying one at the market. I pay attention. He pulled out her chair with old-fashioned courtesy that made her heart flutter. It is good to see you again, Clara. You too. She sat down, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. I have been a little nervous, to be honest. Me too, Jason admitted, which surprised her. I kept worrying you would realize that our whole meeting was bizarre and decide I was too weird to have coffee with. I think I was the weird one in that scenario. You were just grocery shopping when a strange woman used you as a human shield. Best grocery shopping trip ever, Jason said with that easy smile that made her relax. So tell me more about being a veterinary technician. Have you always wanted to work with animals? They fell into conversation as easily as they had at the market, the initial nervousness fading as they talked. Clara learned that Jason had grown up in the area, that his father had started the development company, and Jason had taken it over when his father retired 5 years ago. He was passionate about his work, but admitted the business side often felt isolating. People see the money and the success and they make assumptions, Jason said, turning his coffee cup in his hands. They think I have everything figured out or they want something from me. It is hard to know who is being genuine. That sounds lonely, Clara said honestly. It can be. Jason met her eyes. That is why Saturday was so refreshing. You did not know who I was and you just treated me like a regular person who happened to be conveniently tall enough to hide behind. Clara laughed. I am never going to live that down, am I? Never, Jason agreed cheerfully. But for what it is worth, I am glad it happened. I do not usually meet people I actually want to spend time with. They talked until the coffee shop started preparing to close, surprised when they realized 3 hours had passed. Jason walked Clara to her car, his hand finding hers naturally as they crossed the parking lot. Can I see you again? He asked when they reached her old Honda Civic. Maybe dinner this time, somewhere that is not a coffee shop or a farmer's market. I would really like that, Clara said. But I have to ask. You know I am not in your world, right? I am a veterinary technician who drives a 12-year-old car and splits rent on a small apartment with a roommate. I do not go to galas or charity events. I spend my days cleaning up pet accidents and my evenings watching cooking shows in my pajamas. Jason stepped closer, his free hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. Clara, I have been to 100 galas with people who would not bother to learn my coffee order. I have dated women who cared more about my bank account than anything I had to say. You looked at me like I was just a person who could help you, not a bank account or a networking opportunity. That is rare. That is valuable. And I really want to get to know you better if you will let me. Clara felt her breath catch at the sincerity in his voice. Okay, yes, dinner, Friday night, Jason asked hopefully. Friday night, Clara confirmed. He leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, a gesture that felt both chaste and incredibly intimate. I will text you details. And Clara, wear whatever makes you comfortable. I do not care about impressing anyone but you. Clara drove home feeling like she was floating, her mind replaying every word, every look, every casual touch. When she got back to her apartment, her roommate Sophie was curled up on the couch watching a reality show. You have that look, Sophie said immediately. The date went well. It was not really a date, just coffee. But Clara could not stop smiling. Just coffee does not make someone look like that. Tell me about him. So Clara did, and Sophie listened with increasing delight, occasionally interjecting with questions or excited commentary. He sounds amazing, Sophie said when Clara finished, and completely into you. When is the actual date? Friday, dinner somewhere. I have no idea where because he said he would text me details. You need to let me help you pick an outfit, Sophie declared, if he is taking you somewhere nice. Friday did turn out to require Sophie's help, because Jason made reservations at a restaurant Clara had only ever read about in the newspaper's dining section. She wore a simple black dress that Sophie insisted looked elegant rather than plain, with her hair down and minimal makeup. Jason picked her up right on time, and the way his face lit up when she opened the door made every nervous moment worthwhile. You look beautiful, he said simply. You clean up pretty well yourself, Clara replied, taking in his dark suit and the way it fit him perfectly. Dinner was incredible. The restaurant was intimate and quiet, the kind of place where the servers knew Jason by name but were professional enough not to make a fuss. They talked about everything and nothing, and Clara was surprised by how comfortable she felt. Jason asked about her family, laughing when she described her 2 older brothers who still treated her like she was 12. She learned about his own family, his mother who lived in Florida now and his sister who ran a non-profit in Seattle. You ever wish you had done something different? Clara asked over dessert. Gone into a different field, Jason considered the question seriously. Sometimes. I love the creative side of development, seeing a project go from concept to reality. But I miss being able to just exist without everyone having an opinion about what I should do or who I should be. What about you? Is veterinary medicine what you always wanted? Since I was 8 and found a stray kitten in our backyard, Clara said. My parents said we could not keep it unless I proved I could take care of it. I spent weeks researching proper cat care and feeding schedules. Eventually, they gave in. That cat lived to be 19 and slept on my bed every single night. That is the sweetest thing I have ever heard, Jason said, his expression soft. When he drove her home, Jason walked her to her door but did not push for anything more than a gentle goodnight kiss that still left Clara's head spinning. Can I see you this weekend? He asked, his forehead resting against hers. Yes, Clara breathed. They fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Jason came to the farmer's market with her on Saturday mornings, helping her carry bags and charming the vendors who quickly got used to seeing them together. They had dinner twice during the week, and Jason started showing up at the clinic at the end of Clara's shifts with coffee or takeout. He met Rachel, who gave Clara an enthusiastic thumbs up when Jason was not looking. They spent hours just talking, learning each other's rhythms and preferences, and the attraction between them grew steadily stronger. Clara found herself falling for him in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Jason was thoughtful and generous, remembering small details she mentioned in passing and following up on them later. He brought her favorite pastries from a bakery across town, donated to the animal shelter the clinic worked with, and sent her pictures of dogs he saw during his day with captions that made her laugh out loud. But he also listened when she talked about difficult cases at work, held her when she cried after they lost a patient despite their best efforts, and never made her feel like her problems were too small to matter. "You know I am completely crazy about you, right?" Jason said one evening as they sat on her apartment couch watching a documentary about penguins that Clara had insisted on. Clara looked up at him, her heart full. "I am crazy about you too. This whole thing still feels a little surreal sometimes." "What part?" "The part where you attacked me at the farmer's market, or the part where I convinced you to give me a chance." "I did not attack you," Clara protested, laughing. "I strategically utilized available resources. You jumped me. I politely requested assistance." Jason pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her securely. "You can jump me anytime you want," he said, his voice dropping lower. "I will always catch you." They had been taking things slowly physically, both wanting to build something real before rushing into anything. But that night when Jason kissed her, it was different, deeper, more intense, filled with weeks of building tension and genuine affection. Clara kissed him back with everything she felt, her fingers tangling in his hair as his hands spanned her waist. "Clara," Jason said against her lips, his voice rough, "if you want me to stop, you need to tell me now." "I do not want you to stop," Clara said clearly. "I want you. Jason, I want this." What happened next was tender and passionate and perfect in ways Clara had never experienced before. Jason was attentive and careful, making sure she was comfortable, checking in with her, and making her feel cherished in a way that brought tears to her eyes. Afterward, they lay tangled together on her bed, Jason's fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I love you," Jason said quietly into the darkness. "I know it is fast and maybe I should wait to say it, but I do. I love you, Clara." Clara's breath caught, her heart feeling too big for her chest. "I love you too. I have for a while now. I was just scared to say it." "Scared of what?" "That this was too good to be real. That I would wake up and it would all be a dream, or you would realize I am too ordinary for your life." Jason shifted so he could look at her properly, his expression serious in the dim light filtering through her window. "Clara, you are the least ordinary person I have ever met. You are kind and genuine, and you care about things that matter. You make me laugh and you make me want to be better. I have never felt like this about anyone, so please believe me when I say I am in this completely. You and me. For as long as you will have me." Clara kissed him, pouring every ounce of love and trust she felt into it. "For as long as we both want," she agreed. "Together." The next few months were the happiest of Clara's life. She and Jason became inseparable, splitting their time between his penthouse downtown and her small apartment that he claimed to love because it felt like a real home. He started attending work events with her, charming her coworkers at the clinic's annual fundraiser, and getting his picture taken holding a very unimpressed tabby cat for their social media. Clara attended her first charity gala as Jason's date, nervous in a borrowed designer dress, until Jason whispered in her ear that she was the most beautiful woman in the room, and he could not wait to leave so they could go home and order pizza in their pajamas. They had their first real fight about 3 months in, when Clara found out Jason had quietly paid off the clinic's outstanding equipment loan without telling her. "You cannot just do things like that," Clara said, frustrated and overwhelmed. "That is a huge amount of money, and you did not even ask me." "I did not think it would upset you," Jason said, clearly confused. "Your boss mentioned they were struggling with the payments and I could help, so I did." "Jason, I know you are used to solving problems with money, but this affects my workplace and my career. What are people going to think? That I asked you to do it? That I am using you? No one thinks that. Everyone knows you did not know about it until after. That is not the point." Clara took a breath, trying to organize her thoughts. "I need you to understand that we are partners. You do not get to make unilateral decisions even if you think you are helping. We have to talk about things." Jason was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are right. I am sorry. I am so used to making decisions on my own, and I did not think about how it would affect you. I promise I will talk to you before I do anything like that again." They worked through it, learning how to navigate the reality of their different financial situations and communication styles. Jason made a genuine effort to include Clara in decisions that affected both of them, and Clara worked on accepting that Jason's generosity came from a place of love, not a desire to control or show off. There were other challenges too. Derek showed up at the clinic one day, trying to convince Clara she was making a mistake dating someone out of her league. Jason arrived in the middle of Derek's speech, having stopped by to take Clara to lunch, and his presence alone was enough to make Derek leave. But Clara filed for a restraining order that week, with Jason's full support and the help of a lawyer he recommended. "I should have done this months ago," Clara admitted that night, curled up against Jason's side on his couch. "You were trying to handle it the best way you knew how," Jason said gently. "But I am glad you are taking this step. You deserve to feel safe." The restraining order went through without issue, and Derek finally seemed to get the message. Clara slowly relaxed, the constant low-level anxiety she had been carrying fading away. As fall turned to winter, Jason started acting slightly nervous, which Clara found both endearing and confusing. He was always confident and self-assured, so seeing him fumble with his phone or change the subject abruptly was unusual. Rachel insisted he was going to propose, but Clara tried not to get her hopes up. They had only been together for 6 months, which felt too soon even if every day with Jason felt right. Then one Saturday morning at the farmer's market, the place where they had first met, Jason took her hand and led her to a quiet spot near the flower vendor. "Clara, I have been trying to figure out the perfect way to do this for weeks," Jason said, his hands holding hers tightly. "I had all these elaborate plans, but then I realized that the best moments we have had together have been the simple ones, the real ones, so I am just going to say it." He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket and opened it to reveal a stunning ring, elegant and classic with a diamond that caught the morning light. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. You make every day better just by being in it. You challenge me and support me and make me laugh even when I am having the worst day. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will let me. Clara Zimmerman, will you marry me?" Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she nodded, her voice coming out choked with emotion. "Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you." Jason stood and slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was witnessed by at least a dozen market vendors who burst into applause. Margaret from the apple butter stand was crying, and the pasta vendor was cheering. "I love you," Clara said against Jason's lips. "So much, I cannot believe this is real." "It is real," Jason promised. "You and me, I am never letting you go." They spent the rest of the morning celebrating at the market, accepting congratulations from people they had been seeing every Saturday for months. When they finally made it back to Jason's apartment, he pulled Clara close and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I was so nervous," Jason admitted. "I was terrified you would say it was too soon or that you were not ready." "Jason, I have been ready since you pretended to be my boyfriend to protect me from my ex," Clara said with a laugh. "I think I started falling in love with you that day and just did not realize it yet." Planning a wedding turned out to be both exciting and exhausting. Jason wanted to give Clara whatever she wanted, which was sweet, but sometimes overwhelming. They compromised on a medium-sized wedding, big enough to include everyone important but small enough to still feel intimate. Clara's parents flew in from Arizona and immediately fell in love with Jason, her father pulling her aside to tell her he was proud of the woman she had become and the man she had chosen. Jason's mother came up from Florida and spent an afternoon with Clara looking at wedding dresses, sharing stories about Jason as a child that made Clara laugh until her sides hurt. "He has never been like this with anyone," Jason's mother said seriously as they sat in a bridal shop drinking champagne. "I have watched him date plenty of women who wanted the lifestyle more than they wanted him, but you make him happy in a way I have never seen. Thank you for loving my son." "Thank you for raising such an amazing man," Clara replied, meaning every word. They got married on a perfect spring day at a botanical garden, surrounded by flowers and the people they loved most. Clara wore a dress that made her feel like a princess, and when she walked down the aisle and saw Jason waiting for her, his eyes bright with unshed tears, she knew she was making the best decision of her life. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They had written their own vows, and Clara's voice only shook a little as she promised to love Jason through everything life threw at them, to be his partner and his home, to laugh with him and challenge him and stand by his side always. Jason's vows made half the guests cry, including Clara, as he spoke about how she had changed his life completely, how she had shown him what love was really supposed to feel like, and how he would spend every day trying to deserve the gift of her love. The reception was a blur of dancing and laughter and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Rachel gave a speech about how Clara had called her from the farmer's market parking lot after meeting Jason, insisting she had just met the most interesting man in the world. One of Jason's business partners talked about how Jason had become noticeably happier and more relaxed since meeting Clara, how she had been good for him in ways that went beyond business success. But Clara's favorite moment came late in the evening when she and Jason snuck away from the reception for a few minutes alone. They stood in a quiet corner of the garden, Jason's arms wrapped around her from behind, both of them watching the party continue without them. "Happy?" Jason asked softly. "Incredibly," Clara said, leaning back against him. "I still cannot believe how much my life has changed since that day at the farmer's market." "Best day of my life," Jason said. "The day you decided I was tall enough to hide behind." Clara turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face. "I love you, Jason Vance, my husband." "I love you too, Clara Vance," Jason said, smiling at her new name. "My wife, my partner, my home." They went on a honeymoon to Italy. 2 weeks of exploring ancient cities and eating incredible food, and making love in beautiful hotels with views that took Clara's breath away. Jason was attentive and romantic, planning surprises and adventures, but also giving them time to just be together. Lazy mornings in bed and long walks through cobblestone streets. When they returned home, reality set in quickly, but it was a good reality. They had decided to live in Jason's penthouse primarily, but kept Clara's apartment for a while, neither quite ready to let go of that piece of their history. Clara continued working at the clinic, something Jason supported completely even when some of his business associates made comments about his wife having a job. "Let them talk," Jason said when Clara mentioned it. "You love what you do and you are amazing at it. I would never ask you to give that up." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Jason made an effort to be home for dinner most nights, and Clara learned to navigate the social obligations that came with being married to someone in Jason's position. She discovered she was good at charity work, especially anything involving animals, and ended up on the board of the local animal rescue organization. Jason joked that she was better at working a room than he was, which made Clara laugh because she still felt awkward at fancy events even a year into their marriage. Their first major challenge as a married couple came when Jason's company faced a serious setback. A major development deal fell through due to circumstances beyond his control, and the financial and professional fallout was significant. Clara watched her confident husband become stressed and withdrawn, working 16-hour days and barely sleeping. "Jason, you have to talk to me," Clara said one night when he came home after midnight for the 5th day in a row. "I know this is hard, but shutting me out is not the answer." "I do not want to burden you with this," Jason said, exhaustion clear in every line of his body. "This is my problem to solve. We are married. Your problems are my problems. That is what partnership means." Clara took his hand and led him to the couch, making him sit down. "Talk to me. Tell me what is happening." So Jason did, explaining the complicated details of the failed deal and the ripple effects it was having. Clara listened, asking questions when she did not understand something, and just being present. She could not solve his business problems, but she could make sure he ate proper meals and got enough sleep and remembered he was not alone. "I do not know what I would do without you," Jason said one night, his head in her lap as she ran her fingers through his hair. "You keep me grounded." "We keep each other grounded," Clara corrected. "That is how this works." It took months, but Jason and his team eventually worked through the crisis. The company survived and adapted, and Jason emerged more confident in his leadership and more appreciative of what really mattered in his life. On their 2nd anniversary, they went back to the farmers' market where they had met. It had become a tradition, this return to the beginning of their story. They walked through the same aisles, bought apple butter from Margaret, who hugged them both, and stood near the tomato stand where Clara had first hidden behind Jason. "I have been thinking," Jason said as they stood in that spot, "about what comes next for us." "What comes next?" Clara asked, curious. "I want to start a family with you. I want kids who have your compassion and your laugh. I want to be a father and watch you be a mother. I think we would be really good at it together." Clara felt her heart swell with love and certainty. "I want that too. I have wanted it for a while, but I was not sure if you were ready." "I am ready. I am ready for all of it, as long as it is with you." They started trying for a baby that month, and Clara got pregnant 3 months later. The pregnancy was not easy, with morning sickness that lasted well into her 2nd trimester, and various complications that had both of them worried. But Jason was there for every doctor's appointment, every midnight craving, every moment of fear and anticipation. When Clara went into labor 5 days before her due date, Jason drove her to the hospital with his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Labor was long and difficult, but Jason never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction and whispering encouragement when she was sure she could not do it anymore. Their daughter was born just after sunrise, tiny and perfect and already screaming her displeasure at the world. They named her Caroline after Jason's grandmother, and when the nurse placed her in Clara's arms, both of them cried at the sheer, overwhelming love they felt. "She is perfect," Jason said, his finger gently stroking Caroline's tiny hand. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." Parenthood was exhausting and wonderful and harder than Clara had imagined. But they figured it out together, taking turns with night feedings and diaper changes, learning Caroline's different cries and what they meant. Jason was a natural father, patient and gentle and completely devoted to his daughter. Clara went back to work part-time when Caroline was 4 months old, grateful that the clinic was flexible and that Jason's resources meant they could afford excellent child care. But she missed her daughter terribly during those first days back, calling home multiple times to check on her. "She is fine," Jason assured her each time. "I promise, but I miss you too and I cannot wait for you to get home." They found their rhythm as a family of 3. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market now included a stroller and a baby carrier, with Caroline sleeping peacefully through most of the trip. The vendors loved having a baby to coo over, and Margaret knitted Caroline a tiny hat that she wore constantly. When Caroline was 18 months old, Clara found out she was pregnant again. This time with a boy they named Cole, who was born on a snowy February afternoon and had Jason's dark hair and serious expression from day one. Their family felt complete with 2 children, the penthouse they had once shared as newlyweds now filled with toys and laughter, and the beautiful chaos of raising kids. There were hard days, of course. Times when Clara felt overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood and work. Times when Jason struggled with the balance between his business and his family. But they always came back to each other, remembering the promise they had made at that farmer's market and in front of all their friends and family. They were partners. They were in this together. On their 5th anniversary, they managed to get away for a weekend alone while Jason's mother watched the kids. They went back to the botanical garden where they had gotten married, walking the same paths they had walked as bride and groom. "You remember what you said in your vows?" Clara asked as they stood near the spot where they had exchanged rings. "Every word," Jason said. "I promised to love you through everything, to be your partner and your home. I meant every word then, and I mean it even more now." "You have kept every promise," Clara said softly. "You have given me a life I never imagined, 2 beautiful children, a love that makes every day better. I am so grateful I hid behind you at that farmer's market." Jason laughed and pulled her close. "I am grateful you were terrible at hiding. Otherwise, I might never have found you." "You would have found me," Clara said with certainty. "Somehow, we were always supposed to find each other." They stood there holding each other as the sun set behind them, 2 people who had started as strangers and become everything to each other. A woman who had needed protection, and a man who had offered it without hesitation. A fake relationship that had become the most real thing in both their lives. Years later, when Caroline was old enough to ask how her parents had met, Clara would tell her about the farmer's market and the ex-boyfriend, and how her father had pretended to be Clara's boyfriend, without even knowing her name. Caroline would declare it the most romantic story she had ever heard, and Jason would pull Clara close and remind her that he would gladly pretend to be hers for the rest of his life. But there was no pretending anymore. There never really had been, not from that very first moment when Jason had protected a scared woman without question or hesitation. What they had built together was real and lasting and true. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. It was love, in all its complicated glory. The kind of love that started with a simple act of kindness and grew into a lifetime of partnership, trust, and devotion. The kind of love that made everything else worthwhile. Clara and Jason Vance built a life together that honored where they had started and celebrated where they were going. They raised their children with love and laughter. They supported each other's dreams and held each other through difficulties. They went back to that farmer's market every Saturday morning that they could, teaching Caroline and Cole about fresh vegetables and local vendors and the importance of community. And sometimes, when they were standing near the tomato stand, Jason would pull Clara close and pretend they were meeting for the first time all over again. She would laugh and hide her face against his shoulder, and he would wrap his arms around her and tell everyone nearby that she was his girlfriend, his wife, his entire world, because that was the truth. From that strange morning when Clara had hidden behind a billionaire at the farmer's market, and he had pretended they were together naturally, they had built something extraordinary, something worth celebrating every single day, something that would last them the rest of their lives.